Hello, I'm Ritchie Knox, and you're tuned in to Virtuous Teacher. Thank you for clicking on the content. This episode, we'll be talking about the art of silence. All right. Are you someone who has or can maintain a silent environment as it relates to your teaching style? Okay. Before we jump into this conversation, I'm going to ask you to check out the descriptions area for ways to connect and support my initiative. I do appreciate it. Also, I don't really know much about what I'm doing right now as far as creating content, generating interest. I don't really know how to do it, but I do know this. I do know that when you like and review, subscribe, all that kind of stuff, I do recognize it as a positive thing. So if you can do those things, I should say, if you're inspired to do those things, please don't hesitate. But let's jump right in. What am I talking about in this episode? Well, I'll give you a backstory. Today, I was covering for another teacher, and I would say about 10 minutes into the class, a student arrived tardy, and he walked into the classroom and he seemed slightly confused. About 1 minute later, he walks up to the desk where I was sitting and he says to me, "Excuse me, sir," because he didn't know me. "Excuse me, sir, why is the classroom so quiet?" And I didn't really know what to say. I had been thinking the exact same thing. I was wondering to myself, yo, why is everyone so quiet? Like, I didn't tell people not to talk. I did give out expectations. I said, hey, I would like everyone to remain in the seat and I need all conversations positive. I did say that. And I said it with a little bit of oomph. Okay. But I didn't do anything beyond that, really. And of course, there were several students within that class that have had my class before, so they know how I roll, and I guess they understand the expectations. And perhaps those students who did not know who I am or was, they kind of followed suit. But when he came up and asked me that question, I immediately wrote this episode. I said, you know what? Let me break down what's happening, because sometimes I do things naturally. And if I sit down and look at it from an analytical perspective, I can write out what I'm doing and share it with someone who might struggle in that area. But the question that looms is why would you even want a silent classroom? And we're going to talk about that. Let's just jump right in. First off, silence is peace. That's the number one thing. All right. I believe that when a space is silent, that can be equated to a peaceful environment. I'll demonstrate. Based on the level of silence in my environment, I believe that we can conclude that my area, the space that I'm occupying, is peaceful. So that's a very good place to start. When your classroom is quiet, it's peaceful. This happened 2 weeks ago. I had a teacher walk in and I had a full class of eighth graders in there, and I was very surprised by her reaction to my classroom space. She said, "Wow, now this is a peaceful classroom." I had some nice classical music playing. The kids were working. It was, relatively silent. And she said it. I was like, wow, that's such a huge badge of honor that I want to take from you. I really appreciate that. I didn't say that, but I definitely said that in my mind. I appreciate that compliment. But I kid you not, she said, this is such a peaceful environment. And it was just a silent environment outside of the classical music. So if you're wondering, why would I want a silent environment? It's because you might value peace. All right. The next one is someone who's silent is often viewed as wise. Let's talk about why you as a teacher could benefit from being more silent. Maybe you are very talkative and things like that, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. But why would you want to be more silent or start to practice silence a little bit more than you probably do now? It's because someone who is silent can be confused as wise. It doesn't mean that they are wise, but it can be looked or viewed as such. All right. Someone who is silent can be viewed as someone who is knowledgeable. In fact, I'll make the argument that when people are talking, it's generally because they don't quite understand something. I think the only reason to talk at all is when I don't understand something. I'll give you an example that you can kind of take with you. Let's say that as a teacher, you say, hey, everyone, we're going to take a test, and the questions are relatively simple. They're kindergarten math questions. Everyone clear your desk and get prepared to take the test. You pass the test out and, you see everyone get started. But then you notice that there's a couple kids asking questions like, hey, so how many times do we get a chance to take this? So I think those questions are coming out because those children are illustrating that they don't understand something. But then you'll have kids who, without saying a word, they've already written their name and they're answering the questions. You want to know why? They're silent and they're just answering the questions because they understand. And I think, generally speaking, when conversation or talk or any version of verbal output is happening, it shows or demonstrates a lack of understanding. All right, even if you just see two people conversating back and forth, they're typically trying to understand each other or understand each other's viewpoint. But then you can look at a married couple who's been married for 50 years and they'll both be on the couch just sitting there reading their newspaper because they understand everything there is to understand about that person. You know what I mean? It's kind of like that. So I do think that in general, generally speaking, silence is often viewed as being wise. Now, the next thing is silence allows for the safe passage of knowledge and information. When you're giving out information in a classroom space, one of the greatest things that can happen is for what you're teaching to go into every student individually without any interruption. All right, so I do believe that when you maintain a silent or quiet classroom, it allows for the free flowing of information more accurately and more efficiently. Just the smallest of conversations can disrupt or distract from learning if you allow it. It's kind of like being in a movie theater and everyone's silent and you can hear the movie is transferring the information from the film to your ears, but you know how easy it is to be distracted by that cell phone that goes off, or that person or those kids having that, that conversation that's in conflict with what you're trying to view on the screen. So I think that silence allows for the safe passage of information, which is why you do want to have a silent environment for the most part. All right, next, silence is stillness. So in this case, I'm going to define what silence looks and feels like. It is stillness, is when nothing is moving. Typically, silence indicates a level of patience. All right. But silence, it is still. That means that there's not really much going on, because talking, or I say output, is not just verbal. Sometimes it can be physical. For example, you're giving out information to your class, and to your left, out of your peripheral vision, you see a kid just kind of just tweaking out and just squiggling and wiggling a lot. You can't tell me that doesn't distract you, because it definitely distracts me. So I don't think that silence is just a verbal concept. It's also a physical concept, showing that you're patient, you're still, you're just kind of waiting for information to be disseminated. So yes, I think silence is stillness. It is patience. It's like being at the grocery store and waiting in line patiently. You can tell that that person is at peace with themselves because they're not fidgeting. We've talked about that in speech class, when you're giving a presentation, not to fidget a lot, because it does show a lack of confidence. But when you're still and you're just giving out information, it does show confidence. So silence, patience equals a look of confidence, whether or not it's true. All right. Now, silence is a safeguard. What I mean by that is being silent can save your life. Let's go to the Miranda rights. What are some things that you hear when you hear the Miranda rights? You have the right to remain silent, and anything you say will be used against you, because your words can be used against you, not only in a situation where you're dealing with police, but in general. I mean, when you're talking to friends, when you're giving information to, a gossiper, anything you say to them can be disseminated to people you know and don't know. However, being silent protects you from all of that. How many situations in your life would have ended better had you just been silent? This is one of those things, right? For me, I can count on, I need several hands and fingers and feet to count this. Times when I'm talking with my wife and I'm like, you know what? I just want to stop talking right now, but I have to get the last word in. But I tell you, many of those situations would have ended much better had I just been silent. And I think you can probably concur. Like, how many times have you been in situations that if you had been silent, it would have went a completely different way? It would have went better, to be exact. All right. So silence is a safeguard. When you're able to control your mouth, it protects you from everything. I'll share a situation that happened in class today. I told a young lady to move from one seat to another seat because where she was sitting, she was just not working. And she could have easily kept her mouth closed, moved to the other place, and continued to work. But instead, she says, "You're pissing me off." I said, "Oh, wow. Okay." So in that situation, had she just been silent, it would have acted as a form of protection. But what happened was I said, "Oh, okay. If that's what I'm doing, then let me continue the work. Let me go a little further. Please go to the phone and let's contact your parents." or contact your parents. So I ended up contacting her parents, letting them know that she used that type of language towards me, that she wasn't doing her work. In fact, she was allowing another student to do her work. So now that information is being transferred to her parents. And I was also, since I'm on the phone with them, able to let them know how she was doing in the classroom as far as work submissions. And by the time she got back into her seat, her eyes was watering because she realized, like, wow, I did not expect all of that to happen. And, it did. And it was very simple. It was just, hey, move to another place. I'm trying to protect you from yourself because you don't have the discipline to be silent and work in that particular setting. So I'm moving you to a different space. But no, she had to go with, you're pissing me off. I'm like, oh, that's a new one. I don't hear that one often. And it's mainly because she's a new student and she doesn't really know how I roll. But now she does. You know what I mean? So it's kind of cool to see that happen in real time. All right. Anyway, the next thing I want to talk about is the power of the tongue. Your tongue is powerful. All right. What you say is almost as pivotal or vital as what you do. All right. Every morning, I look in the mirror and I say, you are amazing. You are intelligent. You are wise. You are smart. You are successful. You are a winner. I say that to myself while looking at myself every single day. And it just does something for my spirit. It just gets me ready for the day. It lets me know that no matter what I encounter for that day, I'm going to get through it. And I can only imagine if I stood in the front of that mirror and I said negative things about myself and things that maybe were disrespectful to myself. I can only imagine how that would impact my day as well. So your words are powerful, and how you use them is so critical. I hope that you're using this great power called the tongue to create positive things, positive experiences. And it's best to control your tongue. It's like a pit bull. I don't know if you ever seen a dog. Even on the leash, it is powerful. And you can see the owner flexing and trying to keep that dog still. That's kind of what the tongue is. And if you can control it, I think that is a sign of being wise. All right. Anyway, conversely, the inability to keep silent, I believe, demonstrates a lack of self-control. We've all been, as teachers, giving out information and seeing two friends side by side having a full conversation right in the middle of what you're trying to disseminate and spread out. And can we agree that their inability to be quiet while you're giving out that information does demonstrate a lack of self-control? They don't have the self-control to say, wait a minute, the teacher is talking and he or she is giving out information that everyone needs to hear, including myself. They don't have that ability. So I believe that the inability to be silent is a clear sign of a lack of self-control. Don't you want to come across as someone that is controlled, someone who is in control of themselves? I think that silence lends to that. All right. Next thing is you teach silence by limiting your own words. Something weird happened today. All right. And just in case you missed that, I said you teach silence by limiting your words. Something really strange happened today. And wow, it was just like crazy. So I had given out the information to my 8th grade scholars and pretty much let them work. But the class got so silent at one point that I got nervous. I was like, wait a minute. Wait, should I say something right now? Should I just give out one of my Knoxisms and get the class kind of pumping again? The class was so silent that you can hear a pin drop. I mean, I'm not even kidding. If you want to know if your class generally is quieter or as quiet as mine, at some point during the class, just do this. Take a pen. Does that pin drop disrupt the entire class in terms of, someone looking up and saying, what was that? Does it do that? Because if it does not, I would make the argument that your class is not as quiet as mine. Today, my class got so quiet. I got nervous. I'm like, wait, is this a good thing or a bad thing? It didn't even feel natural to have 28 students all quiet at the same time. It was weird. All right. It was the best I can explain it is being at a stadium or a basketball game where it's typically loud. Even the smallest of chatter can radiate throughout the entire space. But being in a place that's pretty crowded, 28 people or more, or even just going inside of a restaurant or a fast food joint. You ever had that happen? You go inside of a McDonald's, there's maybe 13 people in there. And then, just imagine that entire space just going absolutely silent. I didn't know what to do. I was just like, wait a minute. So like, should I say something? But I had to catch myself. I said, you know what I'm experiencing right now is the benefits, what I'm experiencing is what happens when you've given out information that is so understandable that there are no questions, which means that is why the silence is taking place. Everyone understands. I'll go back and kind of reiterate. I think silence equates to wisdom or understanding something. So that means there were no questions. And it also means that the lesson was so engaging that, students didn't even want to waste time on conversations in that moment. And it was such an honor to see that happen in real time. I got nervous, and I had to almost talk myself out of ruining my own environment because I was prepared to. I was like, you know what? This is just weird. Maybe are they scared? Am I making them nervous? I got nervous, and I had to just like talk myself back a little bit. Say, you know what? No. This is what teachers all around America want. They want an environment that is peaceful and quiet, and students are working. That's what they all want. All right. Or else, why would they keep saying, be quiet, stop talking? I mean, this is what every teacher wants. And I'm sitting here and engaged in experiencing it. This is why I really wish I could bring cameras into my classroom, because I just think that, there's one thing, or I should say, it's one thing for me to tell you that these things are happening, but it's another thing to see it or experience it. But, one day, maybe. All right. I teach silence by limiting my own words. And by that, I mean, when the class is going, you might feel, like it's necessary to say something, but don't say anything. Don't disrupt the silence. If you're someone who hasn't really tried these methods or thought of a classroom in this particular way, once your class is quiet, don't ruin it yourself. Okay. Let some little kid do something weird and then you go from there, but don't ruin it yourself. You have to get used to it. It's so strange to have an entire class of students talk, or I'm sorry, not talk. All right. It's so strange to have an entire class of students just not say anything. It's strange sometimes, but don't ruin it. Okay. But how do I maintain this environment? I don't talk unless I have to. All right. When you limit the amount you talk, your words carry more weight and power. That's a two-faceted point. First off, in my classroom environment, I never talk unless I have to. I'm only talking in a few instances when I'm giving out information, when I'm reminding students about information, or when I'm correcting behavior. That's usually about the only time I talk. You won't hear me talking about my personal life or on the phone talking to somebody that, that's not in the classroom space, stuff like that, unless it's a parent, obviously. But I'm not talking for the sake of talking. I do know people who talk just because they want to hear themselves talk because they feel nervous that their environment is too quiet. I know people like that. You know people like that. Maybe we're like that. Who knows? But the bigger point is, by not talking excessively, it does allow for those pockets of quietness. And when you have those pockets of silence, it's very difficult for a child to ruin it unless they are someone who just has that kind of personality. We all know who I'm talking about. But generally speaking, most students won't interrupt that silence because they don't want to be the one to do it. They'll wait for someone else to do it, someone more courageous. But I will point out that when you say less, your words are more powerful. Have you ever been in a space with someone who just talks nonstop? Perhaps you've been in a meeting full of teachers, and it's that one teacher that always has to say something just to hear themselves talk. And they typically do it when it's time to go. It's like everybody's pretty much packed up, and the principal asks, are there any other questions, comments, or concerns? And all you have to do is be quiet, and we get to get out this meeting early. But there's always that one person who just wants to throw in that last bit, trying to get that last little Facebook like in real life. I'm not sure how it works, but the point is, man, it happens all the time. But then there's that teacher, I'm sure you can probably picture someone that never really talks. And when they do talk, you listen. You're all ears because you never really hear their voice. I'm that teacher, all right? If you're not in my classroom, you probably don't hear my voice for the entire year. It's possible. You can go an entire school year if you're working in the same building as me that you don't even hear my voice. If you don't come to me, I'm more than likely not going to come to you. I'm probably in my classroom working on what's taking place in the next hour or so, or I'm working weeks in advance, but I'm certainly not in the hallway, chopping it up. And I think it's a negative. I personally do. I think that it's great to have collegial relationships and talking to your friends within the staff body. I do think that's a great thing. I just don't do it. I think I could probably benefit from more collegial conversations and going to another teacher's classroom and just kind of chopping it up, making sure they're okay. So, but that's just what it is. We are who we are, and that's just not something I'm able to do at this moment because I'm so focused on trying to enrich my environment. So, I'm sacrificing some of those conversations with colleagues so that I can make sure that my classroom space is so impactful and that what I'm saying, I'm prepared to say in a way that is gravitational, that allows students to, hear me and even feel what I'm saying. All right, I don't know if that makes sense. It might not. But anywho, students typically take on the characteristics of the teacher. You're the class leader. What do I mean by that? You can typically tell what kind of class you're going. I don't know how to say this. This is really weird to frame, but I will say it this way. As the leader of the classroom, teachers, most likely your class is a mirror image of your personality. Like if you're a very talkative teacher and you're very boisterous and you're probably going to have a class that way. But if you are not happy with that, if you're someone who talks a lot and you're not a big fan of having a talkative class because while you're trying to give out information, you have people jumping in and butting in, they're just kind of, they're pretty much mirroring what you do. But you can start to change that. I'm assuming, I'm not sure, but I think that you can start to change that if you be silent more. All right. If you're quiet more, it just might rub off on your children. All right. I really do believe that if the teacher is lazy and kind of, hangs out outside the classroom, kind of coming in and out of the classroom, not really taking their craft seriously, I, without question, believe that that's going to rub off on your students. But I think in my situation, I am relatively quiet. I do use proper language. I do take my job seriously. And I think that just gets disseminated to my students. When kids come into my classroom, they realize like, okay, we're in here with Mr. Knox. He's serious. He's going to hold me accountable. He's going to hold me to the highest standard possible because I'm assuming, this is the kid saying this, I'm assuming he holds himself to that same standard. And that's exactly what my class radiates. I believe they take on my characteristics. And that's a great thing because I actually do value my job and what I'm doing. And I think likewise they do as well. All right. But anyway, I do think that is something worth pointing out. Now, in order to sustain a silent environment, I think that there's some things you have to do, and that is correcting all negative language. All right. If you don't do so, you're going to notice that students will say just about anything in a classroom space. I'm often baffled by this because I always say to myself, or even to my class, why did you think that you could say that and you're younger than me? I just don't understand that. I don't understand the audacity of today's children. It's like, listen, I'm a 38-year-old man and I'm a teacher. And I'm not saying the things you're saying. What makes you think as a 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old that you can say these things in the classroom space? What makes you think that that's okay? So I think one of the biggest things that you can do to establish a silent or peaceful environment is making sure you address all negative language. And that's not just profanity. That's just conversations that are inappropriate. And once you do that on a consistent basis and even call parents if the conversations are too obscene, once you've done that for a consistent amount of time, a lot of kids won't talk anyway because the only thing they want to say is negative stuff. The only things they want to say are things that will get them, attention, via negative comments and statements. But once you have set the parameter that those type of things won't be allowed, you're probably going to have a silent environment by default because most kids don't say much out of saying something inappropriate. Just say it. All right. And at that particular point, you'll notice that only positive things. And when I say positive, I don't mean like, hey, your clothes look really nice today. I mean, just conversations about the lesson, conversations about the content, or just clean conversations like, hey, I like what happened yesterday. I went and rode my bike and it was kind of cool. I mean, I don't mind those kind of conversations if they're working as well. I don't mind it. But I do think that once you make it a point to correct negative conversations or inappropriate conversations on a consistent basis, it will inherently make your environment more peaceful. I truly believe that. All right. Anyway, through practice, encourage positive language only. You have to explicitly state to your students, we're going to use positive language only. You have to say it. I think that is one of the underrated things about what I do. I actually explicitly point out my expectations, and I don't think a lot of teachers do. They, in a lot of cases, think that the kids are going to figure it out for them. No, I actually have to say it. In my classroom, you're not allowed to use profanity, and you must use positive language. You must use it. And then I follow up what I just said with my actions. When a student fails to comply to that simple requirement, because it's very easy to be positive, but when a student fails to do that and they're using profanity or talking about things that are inappropriate, I'll either address it or I'll address it and call home. Your child is talking about so-and-so in the middle of a classroom space while we're learning. I'll do that in a heartbeat. Okay. And once you've done that once, twice, 3 times, the rest of the kids generally understand, like, okay, he's not just talking. And that is what you have to do as a teacher. You have to establish that you're not a talker. You have to establish that you're a doer. People are terrified of doers. All right. This teacher is not going to just keep telling me to stop cursing. They're going to actually write me up. They're going to document my language. They're going to call my parents and give a verbal description of the things I'm saying. That is much more terrifying when a teacher is a doer. Okay, that's pretty much what a administrator is. An administrator is typically someone who does things. Usually, a teacher will go to an administrator and say, "Hey, can you do something about what's going on in my classroom? Timothy is constantly late, and when he walks in, he's coming in, he's belching out these rap lyrics, and he's cursing a lot. Can you do anything?" That's all an administrator is. And I fashion myself as a teacher / administrator. Even though I don't have the title, a lot of the things that I do within my classroom space handles all my problems. I never have to contact administrators for the most part. I do have to do write-ups because that's a part of my job description. But often I'm sending out reports to administrators after I've pretty much handled it myself. I have to document the behavior because if I don't document the behavior, should it continue, there will be no documentation of it. So I do have to send reports to administrators naturally, but I'm more than happy to call home. One of my secrets is I'll type up a letter, and our system has our children's address in it. I'll type up a letter and I'll put a stamp on it and send it to the parent myself. I mean, I'm doing some of the work for my administrator, and I'm sure they're very happy because they never have to come to my class. I never have administrators come to my class, like never, maybe twice a year, and I'm being generous. All right. But these are some of the benefits to the art of silence, or teaching in a manner that is silent. And of course, you do have to talk, but you're not talking for the sake of talking. Right. But I really hope that you gained a lot of information that you can apply in your classroom space. And if you made it to this point, you like the content. So you have to explain to me why you didn't like the video, or, why you didn't review the podcast. All right. Now, as my last point, please check out my YouTube channel. Check me out on TikTok, Instagram, and I'm also available everywhere that podcasts are available. I will see you on the next one. I appreciate you spending some time with me. Be safe.